Hello guys and welcome back to HJW Gaming and another season update from my Rings of Power server. It feels like an absolute age since I did my last update. I believe it was day 10 and combat had only just kind of started getting underway and we had a lot of discussion around the new pass mechanics. Well, now I believe it's day 22, so just gone past week 3, so maybe it kind of has been an age since I gave my last update and that's why it feels like it. So I will be trying to do these updates weekly going forward. Sorry for the big gap in these. I have been incredibly busy, so not able to produce, but they will be coming more often coming up in the future. Now, the first thing we'll start off with, we will take a look at the map, as I understand that's probably where everyone is, what everyone else is interested in. So we will take a look straight off the bat, and as you can see, the map has changed significantly since our last iteration. I think I talked through how it was very likely that the server was going to become a west versus the east, as all of the western side alliances or fellowships allied together and formed several big kingdoms, along with the southern fellowships, as you can see down here, with blue and then green also being interlinked, leaving ourselves, and we eventually allied with King and Queen in the King Fellowship here in this light purple to form an alliance ourselves, as well as we had kind of opponents swarming around us, which then left the kingdom in the middle of us here, which is a Season 3 Fellowship, GRND, also falling in with us, as well as some of our players, I believe, have helped them through their Season 1 and 2. So they aligned with us. A little bit of an apology here to GRND, because I believe I previously described them as the Grind Fellowship, which made them sound like some kind of dwarf-based gentleman's club. I'm reliably informed they are actually Grond, which would make a hell of a lot more sense. So I will refer to them as Grond rather than Grind from here on out. But yeah, as you can see, it has become kind of east versus the west, and at the minute we are progressing across towards that kind of central area of the map and pushing across into the west. My kingdom here, of course, with the collaboration between Home and Mine, so we are the Mine Kingdom, have progressed across. We were last time battling to capture this pass, which was incredibly well defended by the Blue Kingdom, which is formed of Ilil and Bull. People will likely be very familiar with the Ilil Fellowship, as they've been one of the biggest teams around for quite a long time in Rise to War. And we did have one hell of a skirmish around this area. I think it took both Home and Mine, I think it took 4 or 5 attempts for us to get through this. We hit it so many times and we were just unable to get through. Their defence was incredibly resolute, and we'd kind of chip away 100, maybe 200k at a time of the siege, and then we'd have to come back and rejuvenate troops and come back for a second bite of the cherry every time, which wasn't ideal. And of course, because the pass was on their side, it was a lot easier for them to siege snipe, as they could send very short marches where it took us a minute or two to march across from our tunnelled side. We did also have other fights going on here, so we sent a kind of slightly smaller build-up of our players to also fight around this pass here. The advantage is, of course, the opposite of what I've just described, in that the pass was on our side, so it was a lot harder for us to get siege sniped. Though, as I think I've shown in the last update video, both passes actually, when we tried to take them the first time when they were neutral, both passes got sniped by the Ilil Bull Fellowship. But the benefit we had on this one was that because it was on our side, it was a lot easier for us to retake, because we didn't have the mechanics of those incredibly long marches. We could, of course, stack up right next to it and then just directly send straight on it. So we found this to be a lot easier for us to take versus the northern pass. However, of course, with the northern pass being occupied on their side and our side only being protected by a tunnel, we did have to leave the majority of our force up in this northern area in order to defend, because it wouldn't take much for Ilil or Bull to organise an attack and come through, because the tunnel's not going to leave us protected for long. So while most of our force operated up here, we moved into this southern pass and came through here. So we obviously progressed as we came along through the tunnel system that's available here, and we kept pushing across as we went. And then we kind of used this as we pushed across to try and put pressure on Ilil and Bull and pull their forces away from that northern pass. Despite this, we were of course met with resistance here and had made kind of fairly slow progress. Despite this, they still had incredible forces up at that northern pass and did incredibly well. So I can only give credit to both of those fellowships. They did defend incredibly resolutely, but eventually, Home and Mine, we managed to push our way through. I would say that activity in both fellowships, I think, I got to give credit to the players of both, is so high compared to, we've always been a fairly active fellowship and we always prioritise activity over spend and things like that with our accounts, trying to build a bit of a community of players who are always active and, willing to play. And the activity this season has just been absolutely unbelievable. You'll see it in the merit rankings and things like that, where so many players are just getting involved and creating such a high level server, which is required when we have kind of the enemies that we have. But as you can see, we've carried on pushing across. We did eventually take Carn Durm, and we've also pushed across Eton Moors, and also we did take North Downs, I believe, yesterday or the day before. So we've only recently taken North Downs, and we have since been scrapping around there. We have been progressing also slightly to the south, moving through a pass that we picked up here. But most of the fighting has been going on in North Downs. It's only around an 11 million ping at the minute, but it has been significantly higher for a little while. I think it's hit around 20 million a few times. But you can just see the level of activity going on here, how it is just constant warfare. I think we just got knocked out. I had to leave him there as I had no stamina on. So, but yeah, the activity levels here are absolutely insane. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. It's quite surprising that ping's so low. I'm thinking it's probably waiting for an update to push a little bit higher. But yeah, there's just been constant crazy warfare around North Downs, preventing us from progressing upon their kingdom. And they are, incredibly active, and as I've said, praise to the opponents here. They have done incredibly well. Whilst we were progressing along this, whilst we progressed through this southern side, one thing that the opponents did decide to utilise is this pass was originally owned by the Green Kingdom. So you'll see here that currently Troll Shores is occupied by the Green Kingdom, which is Dant and Legion. So what they did is they took Troll Shores here, came through this pass, and then progressed upon us in this North Downs area. So they used a lot of this. You can see there'll be a lot of tiles here, I imagine, owned by them. Potentially not. Maybe they've been cleared away. But they progressed across this region basically to try and take a little bit of the strain off the and make it no longer a 2v2 between Mine and Home and Ilil and Bull, and maybe even the balance up a little bit. So we had Dant pushing up here primarily, and then some of Legion came a little bit later on, and there was a lot of scrapping, particularly around this pass, with obviously them being located primarily around here. So there was incredible warfare here. We did eventually progress on them. It's kind of 3v2 or 4v2 at times, but yeah, it's just been absolutely incredible and probably one of the most fun servers at the beginning that I've been involved with. Credit to all the enemies. No one's given up when teams have progressed or anything like that. Everyone's been just fighting tooth and nail for everything that they want and deserve. So that kind of tells the story of what we've done. You can see we have taken the Mines of Moria today, so we've only just kind of flipped this more central region across to our side and got this pass to prevent the opponents from progressing. The main reason for this is obviously to stop the opponents from progressing into the central regions here, and therefore having access to a huge amount of our resources that we've since claimed. And then we've also but there's also a few fights going on elsewhere that's maybe worth discussing. I think there's a little bit of a scrap here. So there's Bull and EEWR. I think there's a slightly smaller fellowship here with EEWR that have also spawned in with Ilil and Bull. And unfortunately, unlike the Wolf Fellowship that we had spawn in our spawn lands, they haven't been able to keep a cordial relationship. We've been able to, discuss with Wolf, and they've just kind of gone about their own business. Unfortunately, it looks like there's been a falling out between Bull, Ilil, and EEWR, which is leading to a little bit of small fighting here, which isn't ideal because obviously it diverts them away from the main front. Obviously, they're not allied to us or anything like that. It's just a slightly smaller faction who feels disrespected and therefore getting involved in the fight. Let's wonder what this ping is here. So this was 11 million at the minute. It definitely needs an update. This one's here, 15 million. So yeah, you can see we're fighting Dant here, and then Ilil and Bull here. You can see it's been going for 11 days as well. So pretty much as soon as that my last update came through, that's when we've been fighting since. So that pretty much tells the story of at least Home's side of the equation. You can see the opponents are picking up various passes, I think, just in case we progress in this direction. What's happening in the kind of more south region? Well, Dant spawned in this western region, and obviously, as you saw, pushed up north. Legion actually spawned in the south kind of Gondor region, and then they've taken the regions outside Dol Guldur here, such as the Wold and Celebrant Fields as well, just to link their kingdom up. So they had, I think they might even still have the highest number of control points at the moment, and occupied an enormous amount of land, and so were very, very high. I think they were the two highest on the production rankings at the time, because they had so much land and so many tiles. They were able to farm very, very efficiently, which is something we found that we struggled with when we came up against them, was that they were able to push out troops, whereas we were really, really struggling with our limited resources. Of course, spawning in the same region as mine, it's very hard for one region to fulfill the needs, at least contribution-wise, fulfill the needs of two different very large fellowships. So they had an advantage in that regard, and you can see they've still got an enormous amount of land. You've also got this kind of blue kingdom in the south as well, which is Flame, and then a fellowship called Cats. I'm assuming by the name Cats that they're probably aligned, well, I believe it's kind of a sister fellowship to Dant, as their leader has a very similar name to that fellowship. I'm not 100% sure, but anyway, they're definitely allied as well. So you have Flame Cats allied with Dant Legion, who are allied with Ilil and Bull. And then you also had, unfortunately they're no longer on the map at the moment, but you had another kingdom in the Darklands, which have since been wiped out. We'll talk through in a minute. But they had a kingdom called Tomb and Banished. And they were also allied with the kind of south and west. So there was 8 fellowships primarily that were in alliance, and then we had kind of 5 down our side. Now, the primary fighting for this kind of eastern region has been between initially King and Queen, who I mentioned was our allied kingdom, who pushed south into the Darklands and have had some incredible fights with Tomb and Banished. I know they've been fighting pretty much again tooth and nail. They took Barad-dûr, I think they took it yesterday or the day before. So yeah, they've been fighting a lot of pings here that have been excess of 20 million. You can see there's a number of red pings still around here at the moment, but mainly this is just them cleaning up the Darklands. And they're mainly fighting Legion at the minute, who have kind of pulled away from that middle fight to kind of try and deal with the eastern side and fight King and Queen instead. So that's what they've been doing. Unfortunately, Tomb and Banished have dropped off when they lost their capital. It was very, very even, I think, the fighting between King and Queen, maybe slightly in the favour of King and Queen, as they did make progression on them, but Tomb and Banished were putting up pretty good resistance and slowing their progress massively, until recently, where I believe there's been some kind of issue within their fellowship. I think the senior leaders within Tomb, I've heard both sides of the story, and I'm not going to go into it onto a public video, but obviously, so both leaders basically have fell out, which has led to Tomb kind of somewhat fracturing, which is why you'll see some reports will include Val H as another fellowship. So this is kind of a sub-fellowship of Tomb, of those that fell out and moved away from Tomb. So that then allowed, obviously, that little bit of dis-synergy between Tomb, Banished, and then Val H as well, led to increased speed of progression from King and Queen, and they've since, as you can see, pushed in, and they've taken Osgiliath very recently. Actually, I think they might have taken it in the last few hours at the time of recording. So there's a lot of scrapping going on here. Fighting continues between them and Legion, and also them. I'm not sure, you can see down here, I think they're still fighting with Banished and Tomb. There was a ping here earlier, and it's gone off just at the time I've started recording, typically. But yeah, so a lot of fighting going on in the east. Gronda's had a bit of an interesting one, kind of sandwich between the two of us. The problem they've got is there's not a lot of room for movement for them. It's very difficult for them to progress in different directions when you're really sandwiched between these two teams. They also had an issue where their kingdom partner, which was called Soul, basically they had a falling out very early in the season. You can see, I think they still occupy a kingdom up in this, kind of keeping them restrained in the top corner basically and pinning them in. They basically had to kingdom break, which happened just at the time I recorded the last video because I was very confused what had happened. And they then had to deal with that and fight against the rebellious players. And then some other players joined a new fellowship called FSFA, who joined in the kingdom, I believe, or are supporting Grond, basically. And so they've been able to just start now getting into the fight and getting out. So they've taken East Bite today. And you see they've basically progressed all the way across. They have taken a few of these passes. We let them through North Ravenian so they could loop through Dol Guldur, come back out the other side, and then get involved on this front down here, where they have been fighting primarily. Again, there was a battle ping that's since dropped off, but they've primarily been fighting with Flame and Cats, who pushed across the Emin Wheel. I'm not sure if they still own one of these. They did own one of these here. Maybe they've been restricted. Oh, there we go. So yeah, they pushed across Emin Wheel, and therefore were fighting with Grond. So the fighting down here, there's a hell of a lot of fellowships involved. You'll see when I look at the fellowship rankings just how many fellowships there are in this server to form kingdoms. But basically this server is all go. As you can see from north to south, there is just, along this diagonal line, there is just battle pings everywhere. Constant battle. So it's great to see a very active server. And hopefully I've explained all kind of the politics and goings on of this server. If you guys think I've missed anything off, if you're in this server, feel free to drop it down in the comments and other people can see if there's anything I missed off. Next up, we'll move into the various leaderboards and talk through those. So first up, we have personal affluence, which is essentially a kind of mixed measure between how many buildings you have built within your settlement. That now adds to what's called an affluence ranking, and it also includes primarily the power level of your tiles and the amount. It's a rough reflection, similar to before, to the amount of production that you have, but also reflects how much you've built up within your settlement as well. You can see we're just within the top 100, sitting here in 99th at the minute. We've struggled a little bit on production. We haven't really picked up a lot of big tiles. We've just been kind of involved in that warfare constantly, which you'll see when we look at the merit rankings. We've just been going war, and haven't really been focused too much on the farming, but we've got just about enough production. I think we're kind of sustaining it. We're struggling a little bit to maintain Swan Knights, which I'm using a lot at the moment, and also other mounted troops. It's a little bit difficult to keep them up as they are very expensive, but we're slowly building up a more and more production, which is allowing us to obviously gain that kind of snowball advantage of having more troops. You can see kind of the 8 biggest on the fellowship here. We have Nick from King. Of course, these are primarily going to be those who hold the most amount of land. So that's going to be our kingdom with home and mine. King and Queen obviously expanding into Darklands. And then you have Danton Legion, who obviously have that huge chunk of the south and west. So yeah, you can see we have several representations from home here. So what's that? 4 from home in the top 8. And then we have 1 from Dant as well, 1 from Bull, and then 1 from Mine as well, which is always great to see. So yeah, I'll just give a little brief scroll of fellowship rankings, but yeah, this is primarily production, and obviously you want to maintain a good production so that you can keep as many troops coming as possible, but for me, I'm personally way more concerned about the PvP side, which is where we'll look into the merit rankings, where we are actually onto an absolute flyer. So we are at 1.2 million in 13th. If you look at the ones above us, we're not far off the kind of top 10. We're not even that far off the top 5, to be honest. What's that, 200k between us and 5th place with I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, Aonwi, in 5th place. So we're not far off the top at all, but sitting in 13th place, 1.2 million merit already. So it looks likely that we, if this server remains active, that we will beat our PB merit, which I think is about 3.5 million. Yeah, so we're doing really well, constantly involved at the minute. And you see those above us, there's quite a few home-wise, because we've just been constant warfare the whole time. You've got Raw Daddy, Pyro Husker, 2 very strong players. Same with Stefko, Zampi Durin, Football Star, Malrond, and then Tharwin at the top as well. And where we're split across 2 fronts, there's obviously a huge amount of opportunity for merit, and that gets split kind of all over the place. Like I believe Football Star, Malron, Tharwin are primarily fighting around that kind of Moria area, whereas Zampi Durin, Stefko, Pyro Husker, myself, we're primarily fighting in that kind of North Downs area. So it's just kind of scrapping all over the place, picking up every bit of merit we can. But yeah, we're doing really, really well. I think we're very high in the merit rankings. We're a lot higher than I think we've been before at this stage. So we've definitely made some good changes to our team. So I'll actually go to the commander rankings here. Obviously, these aren't fully representative as people do take their commanders off. But we are quite high on this as well. 17th at the minute with our Dane Ironfoot at level 48. Bit of a spoiler for when I run through commanders later on. But most of those above us are basically those that are higher than us, you know, have their 4 comms each that are higher than us in the merit rankings, and there's a couple who have dropped off. But there are some incredible commanders here, for example, and you can see why they are ahead of us in the merit rankings. Like, the level of commander is huge. We, of course, don't have a Zenith commander, so actually, in my opinion, to be 13th in the merit ranking, when we don't have any Zenith commanders, we're running significantly kind of lower value than a lot of these commanders, I think is actually quite an achievement. So we're doing really, really well. So that was Sokobi's Dane there, who's currently running top, level 49. Malrond also having his Bayorn, respect 15. Very refined gear. Also sitting at level 49, the first 2 to get there. What else we got? Malrond's Gil Galad. Again, very, very strong, tanky Gil Galad. Who else we got? Mine Duns. Dane, something we had a lot of trouble with actually when we faced against Mine in the previous season. Someone who I had a lot of back and forth with, at least PvP wise. Very nice player in the messages, but tough in the PvP. Definitely very strong player. You know, there's various players here who are very, very high. We've got Tharwin as well. Obviously has second gear on it at the minute, not his main. But yeah, lots of very, very strong representatives here. And you'll see there's kind of, you see the meta you can kind of see primarily at the minute. It's all Sauron, Gandalf the White with a Bayorn or another damage dealer sprinkled in along with Gil Galad. Saruman as well, of course, see Saruman in the meta. Lovely Saruman here from King Rick. Surprised it's only respect 8, but obviously he's probably shifted across from another focus-based commander, given that his gear is almost fully refined focus-based. So that's a lovely Saruman here being used by King Rick. But yeah, you'll see there's not too many kind of different commanders being used in this server. I think whilst the meta's kind of shifted a little bit and there's now room for commanders, you know, like Undying, like Saruman I just mentioned, there's Lurtz. You don't see them used a lot because a lot of people already have invested in the Gandalf the White, Sauron, Dane, Bayorn meta, and without respect refunds there was no opportunity to reshift, so you'll still see the same commanders coming up in this leaderboard again and again. But I'll see if there's anything different. There's a nice Gimli here from Raw Daddy. Zenith 4 Gimli with a smoking pipe actually is his second option. But yeah, good attack, high respect, very, very strong. Is there anything else slightly different here? We have from Banish actually, representative here, Pappy Wrath and his Kirun, which is lovely to see. Running a full command based. Looks like this might even be a bit more of a tank kind of build, judging from the stats. Oh no, it's more of a debuff build with some stuns. Interesting. But yeah, it's great to see a Kirun being used. And of course, with the troop metas being changed in the recent updates, there are more commanders that are more viable. So it's great to see some of them being represented. We have Hydra here from Mine using a Galadriel, which is something you don't see very often. Someone who, in my opinion, is not massively in the meta, but great to see her being used. I'm going to have to try and get some reports. A massive 287 focus, so I imagine this does deal some damage. Had a good strengthened unique, though I would say if you're going to do it, I'd probably refine it as the main reason for the unique is that strong healing. So yeah, no, lovely Galadriel there. Anything else different? Balrog using Sestaro. Again, very, very strong build. Somewhere around here will also be his... he actually uses a Baruthiel I've seen and spoke about, and it looks incredible. What else have we got? We've got a Black Serpent here. Zenith 1 Black Serpent. Lovely again. So this obviously forms part of a troop support build with some of the other commanders we've talked about earlier. But yeah, first Azog coming up with Rain. Someone who I've been looking to do a commander guide on for a little while, and Rain uses Azog very, very well. Respect 11 Azog, full troop support build, huge command. I've seen him dealing 100k plus damage or helping others deal 100k plus damage quite a few times. So yeah, great to see a couple of other commanders filtering in here. Now I did skip the Fellowship leaderboard. So at the minute we have Home and Mine sitting at the top, which is no surprise. as of course, as we've pushed across, we've gained more and more land, so we have more tiles to farm, and a lot of our members have spare tiles and are hungry after being trapped in that small starting region. So we have since taken top for quite a long time. I think until the last couple of days, Dant were top. Bull unfortunately have slipped to 4th. They've obviously have been taking, along with Ilil down to 10th, have been taking the brunt of the impact of us moving across, so they lose a huge chunk of tiles as we claim those lands. In 5th we have King and their sister fellowship Queen is down in 9th. Then we have Grond in 6th. Meanwhile, a few other enemies. We have Flame Legion in 8th and 9th, Cats in 11th, and then we have the fellowship that was fighting in the northwest, EEWR in 12th, and then Banish, I think let's show, yes, they're showing 74 members at the minute, which is where I discussed like some members kind of moved away, which has obviously dropped their production numbers pretty significantly, so they're down in 13th, and Tomb obviously with the same thing again, down to 56 members, sitting down in 16th, and then there's some Val H down here run by Atriox down in 19th. There's just a huge number of active fellowships here, like even all the way down in like 15th. Pest Legion, I believe they, unless they've lost it since, but they did occupy this pass here. So even like the 15th ranking fellowship is active, which is crazy to see just how many active fellowships there are in this server. Commander wise, we're looking great. Shadow actually has just jumped up to level 48, so I can get him fully skilled in. But yeah, because we've obviously got such high merit and been engaged constantly in PvP, our commanders have leveled up really well. Obviously, the first to hit level 40 was Dane, so he's highest in our level ranking, followed shortly by the Shadow, also in level 48, and then both of these should be close. So yeah, about halfway through achieving level 48. So our team's progressed well. We've kind of built up a second team, which we're using to try and take tiles and build up that production. So we've built up this team here using Gilgalad and Elrond, along with King of Men and my slowly gaining Bayon Respect 4 at the minute. Yeah, so that's my commanders. We might as well run through a few battle reports while we're here. So we'll have a look at what we got removed by a moment ago when I said that my Sauron was marching back. So first up, we hit one of the Ilil players. They all have kind of very similar names with the INLs, but he's running Gandalf the White, Dane here, an Ascended Shadow as well, very nice, and then also Sauron. So he's running basically the same team as ours, but the advantage that we had in this is that ours are slightly higher respect and probably gear leveled as well, advantaged. And then also we do have the advantage of the mounted buff against the 3 Guardians. Obviously we have the opposite disadvantage against the Sauron, but he's not going to deal a massive amount of damage. A huge damage actually here coming from our Dane, 186k, along with over 100k coming from Shadow as well. Huge report that, another 6k merit in the bag. And then we got follow-up hit by Warming Death from Bull using Frodo and Sam with Undying, Sestaro and the Shadow. Very nice. Good report. And then we eventually got taken down by CTAC P from Bull as well. Do we have anything else interesting in here as well? Do have a couple of fights here with 2 other Ilil players from earlier on. Fighting Thriacus, Sauron, Dane again. Again, the main reason for this will be there's a little bit of a respect disparity here. Oh, that's a lovely Gimli though. Very nice Gimli. High attack. And of course, because we now have the production advantage, the opponents are kind of almost forced to use small units. So while I'm using medium units, I am getting a good kind of counter buff against them, which is really helping. Similar effect here where there is 2 mounted comms, but then there's also the 2 small comms. So that's going to massively cut the damage coming from Dane here. As using the small unit obviously means it gets that 20% debuff, whereas ours has that buff with the Shires. And again, 150k coming from him there. Very nice. Figured that rather than just talking through my own reports, I'd show a few of my fellowship's reports against other players, just to kind of give a little bit of balance and show something different other than just myself for a change. So we got Oysters here up against Dance, getting a good victory here. Of course, I should specify, of course, these are cherry picked, so these are not the results we're getting across every single fight all the time. These are cherry picking some really nice and some interesting results. The reason I picked this one out is Oysters does use Skalhelm as a second damage dealer rather than the usual like White Council hitter like Shadow, Saruman, or Bayorn, of course. Instead, she's gone with Skalhelm, which gets a very good result here with 111k from Skalhelm. And look at that experience that's come in, 102.7k of experience, along with nearly 9k of merit, due to the opponents using marshals. And of course, this is particularly impressive as the opponent will have the counter buff against the three commanders using the Berserker unit as their small. So particularly impressive report here from Oysters and getting a huge amount of XP in return. Then we have Admiral Rain, who, as I said, is using Azog. I loved this report just because of the use of Azog, and he's also using something I haven't seen too much in the server, probably the best damage troop, at least, with the Snaga Thrax being used on both Azog and actually, interestingly, on Sauron. So I found this report so interesting just because the damage he's getting from Sauron, 100k from what's usually used as the tank troop. I think that's really quite impressive. And instead he's decided to use Witch King as his tank. And going up against a very meta combination here. Of course, kind of the meta combination of Bayorn, Dane, Gandalf the White, and also Sauron. So not going up against a weak enemy, and also using 2 tier 4s and 2 mounted tier 3s. So again, we'll have the counter advantage against the Snagas, and then also the Corsair as well being used on Shadow. Despite that, getting a very even result against going against the opponent's counter buff. So impressive to see a good troop support formation in use. Next up we have Bevans, and this is coming up against Zal. I kind of wanted to highlight this as Zal's probably one of the strongest players that we're coming up against here. You'll see from the kind of outfits being used on his commanders, all of which are kind of high Zenith, so one of the strongest players. But I just thought this is a really interesting report, as it's good to see Bevans still getting the draw, using that usual formation with Gil-galad evasion, and then kind of using Elven units on some of the other commanders, and gets a really good result here in my opinion, considering the slight disparity here between gear and investment levels with those Zenith commanders. I brought out a few from Pyro Husker, who I mentioned earlier, who was just above us in the merit rankings. He does have some incredible formations, and you can see kind of the results of some of them here, kind of taking down 2 or 3 armies at a time. I think he's got 2 or 3 different teams full of Zenith 6 commanders, all with fully gold gear. So he does get some pretty incredible results, which we can kind of only dream of. Using Undying here, interestingly, he prefers to use Undying instead of Sauron as his kind of main tank in his army. He's found that he gets better results actually using the Undying, which the Undying's evasion, I'll do a commander guide at some point in the future, but Undying's evasion, the way it works, synergizes incredibly well with a taunt, making sure that all hits come kind of towards him, preventing damage from the opponents. And it's allowed him to obviously get huge damage here with both Dane and Bayorn doing over 100k and bringing him to victory without losing half of his army. And you can see that the opponent he was coming up against, this is the Gimli being shown here, the level 45 Gimli. It's not like a weak army he's coming up against. It is very, very strong. 224 attack coming from this Gimli, strengthened and refined unique, and he's still managing to deal kind of that much damage. Amelie will love me here because I'm finally bringing one up from her, and I just wanted to talk this through, as I thought, again, another great troop support and very kind of off-meta formation doing well here, fighting up against Undying, Gil-galad, Gandalf the Grey and Lurtz. So again, slightly off-meta with the way it's built, but Amelie using the full ranged unit formation, getting a huge amount of damage here, almost 110k from her Elrond, and actually interestingly 70 or 74k from Haldir, both of which are higher than her Legolas, who has the tier 4 at 63.5k. I thought it was a really interesting report. She doesn't use a tank at the minute, which is probably holding back slightly. Amelie just use a Gandalf the White at least with a nice amount of command and focus, but replace Arwen, but I don't think she'll be willing to do that. But very interesting report here again. Great to see a troop support formation coming in, and I got to give some love in to our home leader in AMS. And then I've brought Naughty Meat JR one in as well. I'm sure he'll love me for this. The main reason I brought this one up was I don't think I've got screenshots of the commanders, but there was a big spend disparity between the two of these, both running very, very high respect metacoms, but I think Meats is more around like R10, whereas Denverlands are sneaking up towards the kind of almost towards the Zenith rank, I think. But yeah, an interesting result here. Very, very even draw between the two. With Legolas, actually, I wanted to pick out doing a huge amount of damage, showing what he's capable of once you move him into that Ascension tier, dealing nearly 100k of damage, and he doesn't have the fully refined unique either. So a great amount of damage here coming, 100k, actually more than the opponent's Beorn, which is one of the things that kind of pushed him up towards this result. So very even draw. I think maybe the opponent had slightly more loss troop-wise, but resource-wise, Meat would have lost slightly more. But like, for example, this is the opponent's Dane, so again, obviously very, very strong formation that he was facing off against. Pulling in one from Naughty Wasas here, again bringing in some great results here, hitting through several different bull members, and then eventually hitting the player I mentioned earlier in Zhao. Very, very strong, but again, a great result here coming from Wasas, so well done there. Pulling out, like, for example, one individual report, you'll see here just how effective he was. Actually getting 30 and 45k damage from his tank and support commanders is quite impressive, and then both his main damage dealers over 100k. We played against his fellowship Gondor on stream, I believe, Wasas, when just before he originally joined us, and he was a season 2 player, and it's great just to see the kind of growth of a player, and he's really, really flourishing, I think, this season. I think he's within the top 20 on merit, so yeah, he's progressing really, really well and getting some great results like this here. Again, showing the possibility of the counter buff with his mounted units just restricting that Dane all the way down to 36k of damage. And with that, I've prattled on enough. I've kind of done a much, much longer talk through here, as it's been so long since I did the update. If you guys have enjoyed this kind of longer format of update and you want to see more like this in the future, please smash the like button. I'll really, really appreciate it, and it will tell me that you want to see more like this in the future, kind of more comprehensive updates. But anyway, that's everything I have to bring you, so I really hope to see you on the next one.